we have a new pope. In fact, we have da Pope all the way from Chicago. And so to talk about these wonderful things, we bring on former Midwesterner, now DC power hammer of conservative caucus values. We got Jim Pfaff. How's it going, man?
I'm doing well, but don't make me a non-Midwesterner too quickly. I only go to DC for necessity, not for purposefulness.
So what do you think of the, and I want to make sure he's now Pope Leo XIV, Robert from Chicago. What do you think about this guy?
I'm learning a bit more about him. He was on the list of potential popes back when Francis died. Those lists are coming out. And he's thrown in this moderate camp, and he's being portrayed as a kind of a bridge between the conservative wing of things in the church and the Pope Francis wing of things. He spent some time in Latin America for about 10 plus years. That's my concern about liberation theology, but he's in the Augustinian, he's an Augustinian monk. That's actually a positive thing. That tends to be a more conservative side of things in pontifical thinking. So, we're gonna learn a lot as time goes on, but it is really newsworthy. It's the first American Pope. And that's big news because the Italians dominate throughout the centuries with, certain, diversions from that recently, actually. So, we had a Polish Pope and we had a German Pope, then an Argentinian Pope, and now an American Pope. So that is an interesting trend.
I got to tell you, I do feel pretty badly for the alumni of Villanova, which is where this guy graduated from. Not because, I don't think they should be proud of, having a pope, but that the university is going to use this in every fundraising email from now until the end of time.
Oh, goodness, yes. I mean, it's and people are going to be doing Pope something or other in basketball games. I mean, they're still a credible basketball program with 3 NCAA victories.
Do you think that you're actually going to have a Pope finally visit or bless the college team before the NCAA playoffs?
Oh, they wish. I doubt that that's going to happen, but it would be interesting if it did. That definitely.
Well, I mean, you've had popes. I mean, Pope Francis rooted for Argentina in the World Cup, and admirably so. I don't blame him for that. All I'm saying is we finally have a pope who can acknowledge no other country on this earth has won a Super Bowl before. And for me, that really warms my non-Catholic heart.
Well, for me, I want to see him show up at the canal in Chicago during St. Patrick's Day for when they pour out the green dye. That's what I'm looking for right there. That'll be the fun part.
That's true. So obviously there's a lot of other things to dive into because this Pope has been critical of both Vice President Vance and President Trump, at least according to some tweets that are being ascribed to him. And the immigration policies. Now, that doesn't necessarily carry an enormous amount of weight, given that it doesn't appear that the president or the vice president appear to be willing to change their theology based on the current Pontifex Maximus. But at the moment, I think that those things surfacing, people are trying to discern whether or not, like you said, the guys. An Augustinian, what kind of a monk this dude was. Was he a friar that threw hands? That's the question that anyone ever asks as soon as the white smoke pours out of the Vatican chimney. On the international stage, do you think there's any other big impact, maybe policy-wise or world-wise, that no one's talked about yet? Anything at the top of your mind?
Well, listen, right now in the Catholic Church, and don't forget, inertia continues. So previous inertia doesn't tend to change overnight. And the last time that did happen is when John Paul II became Pope, because that was a shock to everybody. Even within the Vatican, I don't think they expected it. And he did, in a very positive way, get the church back in line to something more traditional. This guy's not likely to do that, having been a friend of Francis's and having worked in South America. So the reason I go through that is to say, I think criticisms of the immigration policy here are likely to continue at some level, and I think that Donald Trump and JD Vance, particularly Donald Trump, should just very graciously, or if necessary, with force, just reject that, because there is a real problem in the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. By the way, there are a whole bunch of solid conservative chunks of the Catholic Church all over the world, but there is a progressive movement in both the Protestant church movement and the Catholic Church movement that we need to be working against. In fact, Megan Basham wrote a book, Shepherds for Sale, some time ago. There are literally funds that have been going for George Soros and Pierre Omidyar to try to affect Pierre Omidyar, one of the founders of eBay, to affect the Protestant church. But there were George Soros connections to Pope Francis beforehand. I'm guessing those are likely to continue at some level in this Pope, unless he just happens to be a reformer in a manner we haven't seen yet. So those, as a believer, as a Christ-following believer, someone who follows the way, as we learn about it in the book of Acts, we need to still have good policy based upon biblical principles, and we're not getting that enough from Christian leaders around the world. I hope this Pope's a little bit different, but if he's not, we still have to go with the scriptural construct. There's not a pro-immigration anything in Scripture, even though people are twisting that theologically. So Donald Trump needs to continue on the path he's on, and I'm going to continue to support him in that.
Jim Pfaff, Conservative Caucus. This is one of the things that does concern me, though. I'm seeing a lot of secular popage. I'm seeing a lot of papacy of the cultural Christian. And I do draw a lot of concerns from that, particularly because we've seemed to have entered. In fact, we seem to be basking in this new era of, well, I'm not actually a Christian. You see this kind of on some parts of the right. They say, well, I just, think that Christianity as a concept is better for the United States than anything else. They're not actually Christ followers. They kind of latch onto Christianity because it's popular on the right. And then on the left, you have these leaders of secular humanism. I think of Bernie Sanders or Mark Carney, who try to lecture their followers on morality of standards of living. Like, for example, don't fly in private jets. And then they turn around and do, like Bernie Sanders, the exact same thing they're telling everyone not to do. I'm growing more concerned that it appears these kind of false Christs, maybe that might just be, calling a spade, do seem to be popping up a lot more. But I mean, maybe Scripture was clear that was going to be happening anyway.
Oh yeah, just theologically, that is absolutely what was always going to happen. The Apostle Paul talked about that ad infinitum. James, Jesus' brother James, who was head of the church in Jerusalem.
I'm sorry, just as a quick Latin note here. The first thing, whenever you say talked about, usually the word that I want to throw in there is ad nauseum, like until you're sick. But thinking that, all right, that's Paul writing in Scripture. Better not use ad nauseum. And you said ad infinitum, infinitely. I was like, oh, I'm so glad Jim did that.
Yeah.
Sorry, please continue.
Hey, I got my Latin down. But anyway, this is...
I was going to say laughs in Latin.
Yeah, that's right. No, this is the way it is. And there is a real spirit that is very wrong. But to your point about people who adopt Christian thinking and try to twist it, it's interesting. In our founding, we had solid Christian believers who were part of our founding, but we also had deists who weren't particularly Christian in some ways, but really believed that Scripture was useful. I think Thomas Paine fills that pretty well, and certainly Jefferson and Franklin. Although Franklin's just an oddity because he grew up in Puritan New England, and
right.
We got that.
Yeah, that man is
he's a trip. But what's different about our founding compared to what you're seeing now is that even the secular amongst the founders, even the non-religious of the founders, believed that the Judeo-Christian ethic was really the only basis upon which to build a free society. Thomas Paine, who was an atheist and said he was an atheist, he still believed Scripture was a useful moral teaching tool. This is consistent with a lot of non-religious, maybe not atheists, but certainly quasi not close to God today. They still know, they talk about morality, but they often don't understand all Western morality, which is really what they're trying to latch on to: be good to people, build hospitals, do nice things, whatever, be just. Well, there's no sense of justice without the Christian moral ethic. Tom Holland, the secular and I think atheist historian, has documented this in his books recently, where he talks about the fact he was he loved Pontius Pilate in the Jesus story when he was a kid, but he came to realize Christianity really did change the world. It changed the barbaric culture of Rome, and in the West brought a non-barbaric culture. This is very real. We need to contend for that, both as believers and even conservatives that may not be believers or not religious. The Judeo-Christian ethic is the foundation of Western society, which is the foundation of all of our concepts of freedom in the world today.
And those kinds of values, I should say, are not only important when we're talking about theological and kind of faith implications, although that is the most important thing any individual will reckon with in their lives. It also dispels this myth that is currently trying its best to leech off of the right side of the culture in this country, that the Islamic faith has done the same kinds of things. And that, look at what Islam has done for the world. They'll suggest that, again, that Christianity, Christ was a prophet, and so therefore it's all the same and it's all wonderful. And that's not true. It's not true at all. And when I look at the caliphates and what those have perpetuated on the world, when I look at kind of the modern influence of radical Islam, talking more the Shia side of things, I'm not seeing any kind of cultural enrichment. Instead, I'm seeing Europe burn to the ground. And so to kind of bring things around full circle, I hope, and I mean this sincerely, is for the new Pope, I hope that this new Pontifex is able to bring an element of leadership out of kindness and compassion, of course, to protect a lot of European, African, and American Christians, Jews, and non-believers from this onslaught of Islamic colonialism.
Yeah, so a couple definitional things, just very quick to get to this, because you're absolutely right. Listen, the concepts of freedom did not come from Islamic culture by and large. But there are two interesting things. So definitionally, you can say that Islam is one of the Abrahamic faiths because they do draw from the Old Testament to some degree. Although, the Quran really,
the split is very early on. Yes.
Okay, so that's fair to say. Right. The other thing is, in the Middle Ages, there was a strong and very influential strain of philosophical insight that was taking place in Islamic culture, which was attempting to merge the ideas of Aristotle and Greek philosophers into their culture. But it was quickly shut down by Islamic culture sometime in the late Middle Ages. So since that time, it has been mostly, although there are strains that are positive, there has been largely a barbaric attempt to control society. And the Judeo-Christian ethic never tried, in large part, to control society as much as build a philosophical framework for freedom so that people could pursue God with their hearts. That is not an Islamic insight in modern Islam. And their efforts, wherever you see Islamic states in control, they do not liberalize. You're seeing a little bit of that happening in Saudi Arabia right now. But why are they doing that? Because they're trying to pitch to the West and build better insights and better connections. So anyway, you can't trust the Islamic faith to provide freedom for society. The Judeo-Christian ethic is the only place where that has happened. And literally for thousands of years, for millennia, that's been the case.
I think that's a really important distinction to make. Jim Pfaff, the Conservative Caucus, thank you so much for taking a moment to stop by and break down the new popage as only dudes like us can.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to give you some theological insight, being a conservative activist nonetheless.